Hey guys, tonight we slip barefoot into the soft, squelching mud of a rice paddy in medieval Japan. The chill of early spring clings to your skin like a damp linen robe, and the sky still hangs gray and heavy from winter's final sigh. You wiggle your toes. Yes, you're barefoot because straw sandals just dissolve in this muck and sink ankle deep into earth that's been soaking up mountain snowmelt for weeks. It's sticky, it's cold, it's alarmingly alive with tiny things that slither and dart. Welcome to your new life. The wind whips past with the scent of old smoke and thawed manure, reminding you that, well, you're absolutely not in the 21st century anymore. You're in a village where everything hinges on this muddy patch of land. The rice field isn't just a job, it's your food, your taxes, your community status, and your future. And surprise, there's no shortcut. You're about to spend the next year coaxing food from this sludge with little more than hope, sweat, and a wooden rake that somehow predates your grandfather's grandfather. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight and what time is it there? Drop it in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The paddy doesn't prepare itself, and you're here because your lord said you were, and that's the end of the story. Today's the day trenching begins, digging tiny canals by hand to guide precious water through the fields. No pumps, no pipes, just gravity, wooden tools, and several well-placed prayers to Sujin, the water deity. You've got a dull spade that looks like it moonlights as firewood, and a back that is already second-guessing its commitment to this lifestyle. You shovel and scoop, occasionally pausing to chew on a barley cake and stare into the middle distance like a wistful protagonist in a period drama. Your breath fogs. The mountain snow hasn't completely melted yet, so every drop of water is icy enough to make your calves scream. Your neighbor, a man with 3 teeth and a bad knee, laughs when you flinch. Wait till summer, he says. Comforting. There's a reason these fields have to be dug up just right. Too shallow, and the water won't pool properly. Too deep, and your seedlings drown. It's a delicate, muddy art. And while villagers pass down wisdom through storytelling and demonstration, historians still argue whether certain trenching layouts were regional traditions or just the result of improvisation and trial and error. Either way, you don't get to pick. You do what your uncle says, or the oldest person holding a hoe, and if you question it, you'll get smacked gently with a reed fan, respectfully. Fun fact, in some parts of Japan, villagers believed that if you heard a fox yelp while digging the first furrow, the crop would fail. So when one screams from the forest nearby, you and your crew pause, exchange glances, and pretend very hard that it was a bird. Not a fox, definitely not. By sunset, you're filthy, exhausted, and your palms look like they've been grated over a washboard. But that's one paddy section done, only dozens more to go, and you get to wake up and do it again tomorrow. Isn't historical immersion just so relaxing? By day 3, your hands have entered a new evolutionary stage. They're no longer yours, not really. They're leathery, swollen relics from a parallel universe where calluses are currency and splinters are constant companions. You stare down at the ancient hoe in your grip, a gnarly wooden shaft capped with a chipped iron blade that's seen more centuries than you've seen breakfasts this week. This tool was probably forged before anyone in your village had indoor walls. And yet, here it is, still being passed around like a sacred family heirloom/shoulder injury machine. You're learning the rhythms now, the digging, the hauling, the smoothing.
Your movements are slightly less tragic than yesterday, though you still get side-eyed by the elders when you pause to stretch. No one says it aloud, but the subtext is clear. This one wouldn't last a day during the Great Famine. Ah yes, always comforting to be compared to survivors of historical disasters. Despite how crude it looks, that ancient hoe you're using, called a kuwa, was one of the most essential implements of the time. The design hadn't changed much in centuries, just a few pieces of wood, some binding cord, and an iron edge, often smelted in low fires using local ore and a whole lot of patience. It wasn't efficient by modern standards, but it worked. Sort of, if you ignored the way it shook your wrists loose from their sockets. Even weirder, in some regions, people believed you had to talk to your tools, literally muttering thanks to your hoe after every long day, or risk angering the kami of craftsmanship. You glance around the field. An old woman is bowing respectfully to her rake. You give yours a subtle nod. Can't hurt. There's an unspoken pecking order here, and your position near the bottom is obvious. Veterans get better tools. You get the hand-me-down hoe with a wobbly handle and what might be a bite mark. You ask if it's from a rat. The village elder looks at you and deadpans, possibly a previous owner. He doesn't clarify if he means animal or human. You decide not to ask again. The labor is mechanical, repetitive, almost hypnotic. Your muscles scream, but your brain floats somewhere outside your body, lulled by the gentle splash of boots in muck and the dull scrape of iron on clay. It should be peaceful, almost meditative, except for the part where your back feels like it's folding in on itself like a badly made futon. One thing scholars still debate is just how much work went into daily paddy maintenance versus other chores. Some believe the fields dominated the schedule year-round. Others argue that, especially in early spring, villagers split their time more evenly between farming and things like roof repairs, tool making, and, yes, building new shrines to keep the harvest gods appeased. In your case, it's 90% hoeing and 10% desperately trying not to cry in front of your neighbor. By sundown, the tools are stacked by the edge of the field like sleepy puppies, and you limp home with the rest of the crew, eyes half closed, ears filled with the fading croak of frogs and the buzz of an early mosquito, your first of many. You feel accomplished, achy, grimy, slightly broken, but accomplished. The hoe's name might as well be Regret Stick, but hey, it's yours now. Be nice to it. Maybe say thanks, loud enough for the gods to hear. Morning rolls in on a bed of fog, curling low over the hills like the breath of a sleeping dragon. You blink yourself awake, fingers still twitching from yesterday's whole marathon, and shuffle out to where the village gathers with purpose. Today, it's water. Not drinking water, no. That's fetched separately, usually with much eye-rolling and swearing under breath. This is paddy water, and today you begin one of the most absurdly delicate and spiritually nerve-wracking tasks of the entire season: irrigation. The paddies are like giant hungry plates waiting to be flooded just right. Not too much, not too little. You're about to become a part-time hydrologist, part-time negotiator, and full-time mud creature. The main tool? A wooden sluice gate with all the engineering grace of a jammed cupboard drawer. The village's entire rice yield depends on these water channels. They wind down from the mountains like lazy snakes, branching out into the paddies via little ditches and trench crossings. And guess what? They're shared. As in, yes, other people also need water. And no, they don't care how thirsty your rice looks. You learn that irrigation season is also negotiation season. Each hamlet has its own little politics, its own water schedules, and its own passive-aggressive aunties who remember exactly which family borrowed extra water in the dry spring of '96. That's 1196, by the way. So here you are, lifting and lowering crudely carved wooden barriers to control the flow, praying your timing doesn't flood one neighbor and dehydrate another. Because, oh yes, villagers kept score. Whole feuds were born from a misplaced gate or water turned on 5 minutes early. A local superstition even warns against changing irrigation flow during a thunderstorm, claiming it invites vengeful spirits into the water itself. You chuckle at that, until a young boy refuses to touch the gate when clouds gather, whispering about Kawanokami, the angry river god. You back off too. Can't hurt. Fun quirk. Some regions used floating talismans made from straw or bark to test water purity. If it floated straight, the gods approved. If it spun in place, oh buddy, you're digging another trench. You pretend to believe, mostly because the old farmer next to you is eyeing your every move like you're about to curse the whole village with rice blight. Meanwhile, there's the matter of cooperation. You're all in this together, whether you like each other or not. There's a rotation schedule scratched into a bamboo slate near the shrine. You try reading it, it may as well be in chicken scratch kanji. Thankfully, someone takes pity on you and mumbles, "You're third." You nod solemnly, pretending you knew that. Totally. Historians still argue whether these water rights systems were communal out of goodwill or strict necessity, meaning, did they share because they were nice or because they had no choice? Either way, it's working. Barely. By late afternoon, you're damp with sweat, soaked in spots from failed sluice tests, and spattered with more mud than water. Your reward? Watching a thin, shimmering film of water crawl its way across your plot. You feel like a wizard. A tired wizard with sore ankles. But your rice now has what it needs. A slow, careful bath. And you? You've learned that in medieval Japan, water was everything. Life, feud, offering, and now the reason your pants will never be fully dry again.
You've started to notice something about the smell of the village. It's not just mud and sweat anymore. There's a new perfume in the air. Sharp, earthy, and absolutely unmistakable. That's right, we're talking about manure. Welcome to the glamour of medieval fertilization. Today you joined the foraging squad, except you're not looking for berries or mushrooms. No, your quest is for waste. Cow dung, horse droppings, decomposed straw, even human waste if you're particularly unlucky. The paddies demand nutrients, and you're the humble delivery system. You try not to think too hard about it as you hoist a sloshing wooden bucket of suspiciously warm sludge and start the noble work of enriching the soil. Honestly, you could bottle this scent and call it Odu Ricefield Regret. Turns out fertilization in medieval Japan was a whole category of both science and superstition. Ash, compost, and even dried fish scraps were used to boost the soil's vitality. In some coastal villages, families would bury fish heads near the field boundaries, supposedly to nourish the earth and keep away bad spirits. You see a neighbor doing this today, patting the ground like she's putting a baby to bed. She hums a little tune while doing it. Creepy? A bit. Kinda comforting? Also yes. You spread a fermented concoction that smells like it could raise the dead. It's a mix of composted human waste, night soil, as it's charmingly called, and rotted rice hulls. Some villagers swear by adding persimmon peels for good fortune in the flavor of the rice, though no one can quite explain how or why. Maybe the gods like antioxidants. There's also a slightly horrifying ritual that only gets mentioned in whispers. Hime no koji, or princess's brew, a folk mixture rumored to contain crushed plum seeds, incense ash, and hair clippings, mixed with manure to please the field spirits. No one's really sure if anyone actually made it, or if it's just a cautionary tale for overambitious farmers with too much free time. You ask an elder if it really works. He shrugs and says, if the rice grows, it worked. If it doesn't, we blame the rain. Fair enough. This part of the process doesn't get as much glory as planting or harvesting, but it's crucial. Without proper soil health, the whole season could collapse. And here's the kicker. Historians still argue over how widespread organic practices were and whether certain techniques, like mixing ash with manure, were instinctive or informed by deeper agricultural knowledge. Maybe it was both. Maybe ancient farmers just knew what worked without needing a scientific explanation. Or maybe they were just guessing and praying. Either way,
You're now part of this sacred, stinky tradition. As you sling another bucket's worth into the wind, and partially onto your own sleeve, classic, you realize something. You've stopped holding your breath. You're adapting. That's either a sign of resilience or olfactory defeat. At the end of the day, your paddy is speckled with dark patches of organic love, and the whole village smells like a barn got into a bar fight with a compost pile. But there's pride in that stink. It's the smell of effort, of history, of impending back pain. You head home with a smile that says, "I fertilized the earth today," and a smell that says, "Do not sit next to me at dinner."
You wake before the sun, roused by a rooster who sounds like he's been practicing opera in reverse. The air is heavy with dew, the kind that clings to your eyelashes and makes every breath feel like a sip. Today isn't about tools or mud. It's about belief. Seed soaking day. You shuffle with the others to the edge of the central paddies, where a shallow stone trough has been filled with water. In your arms, a tightly wrapped bundle of rice seeds, harvested and saved from last year's crop. These are the future, and soaking them is not just a chore, it's a ritual. One by one, villagers dip their bundles into the cold water, but they don't just plop them in like pasta. There's ceremony involved. A whispered prayer here, a quick bow there. A few of the elders chant under their breath, invoking the protection of Inari, the rice deity, and possibly a few backup spirits, just in case. Can't be too careful when your entire year's survival is on the line. Some families have their own secret soaking techniques. Yours? Soaking at night under a waxing moon, believing that growing light brings strong sprouts. In other regions, they soak during a full moon to capture its energy. Superstition? Maybe. But hey, so far your family line hasn't starved to death, so who's to argue? As you lower your seed bundle into the water, a tingling travels up your arms. Maybe it's spiritual energy. Maybe it's the cold. Let's go with spiritual energy for now. A young girl beside you drops her seeds and whispers, "Grow strong, little babies." You scoff, but then find yourself muttering something similar under your breath. This is how it begins, your slow transformation from skeptic to sentimental rice parent. And the weird doesn't stop there. In one part of Japan, some believed that if you spilled even a single seed during soaking, you had to make a seed offering to the river to atone, usually involving a piece of rice cake and a folded paper crane. Someone near you fumbles and spills an entire handful. The silence is immediate. They freeze, whisper an apology to the water, and scurry off toward the stream with a nervous rice cake. Nobody laughs. This stuff's serious. Back on the practical side, you learn there's an exact art to soaking. Not too long, not too short. Too brief, and the seeds won't germinate. Too long, and they rot. The rule of thumb is 3 to 5 days, depending on water temperature and season timing. Historians still argue whether seed soaking in medieval Japan followed standardized calendars or was entirely dependent on local lore and observation. There are scrolls with contradicting instructions, which is either scholarly chaos or a charming reminder that rice farmers were also winging it like you. By midday, the sun finally peeks over the trees, warming your damp sleeves. You pat your soaking seeds like they're tucked into bed, then cover the trough with a woven reed mat to keep away nosy birds, and nosier children. Tomorrow, the bundles will be checked. In a few more days, if all goes well, the seeds will sprout. For now, you walk home, hands pruny, and heart just a tiny bit proud. You've begun the process of bringing life into the world. And yes, it started with wet socks. The soaked seeds have started to sprout, tiny white rootlets poking out like whiskers on newborn kittens, and you feel an odd mixture of triumph and dread. Triumph because, hey, they lived. Dread because now you have to raise them. Welcome to rice nurseries.
Today, you and the rest of your crew are prepping a corner of the paddies that's shallower, drier, and weirdly coddled compared to the swampy soup you've been working in. This nursery bed, or mabuta, is where the baby rice plants will grow strong enough to be transplanted. And yes, they are treated better than you. You slept on a straw mat last night. These seedlings are getting a hand-smooth bed of warm, silty soil and a gentle water misting, courtesy of a kid with a bamboo ladle. You gently scatter the sprouted seeds across the nursery bed, spacing them out like you're seasoning a sacred dish. You try to act like you know what you're doing, but halfway through, an old woman corrects your wrist angle with a grunt and a slap. "You're not throwing salt at a demon," she mutters. Fair. The nursery bed isn't just a farming step. It's a protected zone, literally. Some families erect tiny fences around it using sticks and reed rope, not to keep animals out, but to ward off evil eyes. A rumor whispers through the village that if someone envies your rice seedlings too much, their jealousy will curse the sprouts. One solution? Hang a pair of old sandals nearby to confuse the spirits. You catch someone tying a worn-out slipper to a bamboo stalk and making a very serious face. Totally normal day. As the seedlings start to grow, you take on a new routine: watering, weeding, gently brushing dirt off fragile leaves, and occasionally singing to them. Yeah, you heard that right. Some regions had lullabies passed down specifically for rice seedlings. You try humming one under your breath, feeling just slightly ridiculous, until you notice 3 others doing the same. The fields echo softly with sleepy melodies. Honestly, kind of peaceful. The seedlings grow fast, too fast it feels. In less than 2 weeks, they'll be tall enough to be transplanted, but this stage is deceptively fragile. A surprise cold snap, a heavy rain, even a wandering duck can wipe out half the nursery. You become hyper-vigilant. Is that a bug? A fungus? A weird breeze? Your paranoia peaks when someone spots a white moth flitting near the sprouts. Bad omen, someone whispers. Might be a rice spirit checking for weakness. You blink slowly and do not ask follow-up questions. There's even debate among scholars about how precise medieval farmers were at gauging transplanting timing. Some argue it was meticulous, measured by plant height, color, and leaf width. Others say it was more vibes-based, with the head elder just declaring, "It's time," based on the way the wind felt on his back. Probably both. Probably neither. Again, farming was part science, part mystery, part deeply inherited stubbornness. By the end of the week, your rice babies are standing strong, bright green, wiggly in the breeze. You feel the tiniest swell of parental pride as you walk the rows barefoot, whispering compliments like, "Look at you, so chlorophyll-rich today." You're not quite a farmer yet, but you're definitely a rice dad now, or mom, or funky rice cousin. Either way, you're attached. And in about a week, you're going to rip them out of this comfy bed and toss them into the real muck. Parroting is wild. You wake with that peculiar mix of excitement and dread that only comes when you know you're about to do something both extremely important and extremely backbreaking. The rice seedlings are tall now, about a hand's length, and today is their big move. Yes, you've nurtured them lovingly for days, and now you're about to pluck them out by the roots and jam them into cold, sticky mud. It's time for transplantation. You join the rest of the village at dawn, the sky painted in streaks of pink and peach, which you barely notice because your arms are already elbow-deep in seedling beds. One by one, you tug the young rice plants from their nursery plot, trying not to mangle the roots. You cradle them in little bundles, tied with grass cords, like you're preparing offerings for a swamp god. Carrying them to the main field, you see it glisten, an enormous mirror of water and sky, a flat, endless shimmer. Beautiful, really, but you know better. That's not a mirror. That's your office, and it's about to eat your legs. You wade into the paddy. The cold hits like a slap. The mud sucks at your feet with every step, as if the earth itself is trying to politely devour you. You get into position, bent nearly double, back curved like a noodle, hands hovering just above the water's surface, and then the real fun begins. Transplanting means pressing each little rice seedling into the mud, spacing them just so, neither too close, they'll choke each other, nor too far, you'll run out of space. Over and over and over. It's a slow, squishy ballet that will murder your spine. You look around and realize everyone else is in the same position, an entire village of sad, soggy question marks. You wonder aloud, how did anyone survive this for decades? An old man cackles. They didn't. They just stopped complaining. Here's a fun nugget. In some regions, they used strings tied to wooden poles to space out the plants evenly. It was genius, in theory. In practice, the strings would sag, drift, and get tangled around your ankles. You try using one today, only to trip into the mud face first. You emerge looking like a swamp monster. No one says a word. Respect. There's a small but spicy debate among scholars about labor roles during transplantation. Some argue that wealthier villagers supervised while lower-class folks did the dirty work. Others point out that even landowners often joined in, especially if the crop was at risk. Today, you notice one of the higher-ups showing up late with a fancy hat, planting 3 symbolic seedlings, and promptly supervising from a dry log. Classic. Meanwhile, the rest of you are racing against the sun. The seedlings can't dry out. That means hours of non-stop bent-over squatting and gentle, repetitive stabbing motions that make your arms feel like wet noodles and your hamstrings file a formal protest. Around midday, someone brings rice balls wrapped in leaves. You inhale one without chewing, then return to the field. You've stopped feeling your toes. You think, that's fine. By dusk, the paddy is a checkerboard of green sprouts standing tall in their new watery home. You, however, are listing sideways, your back a human question mark, your hair plastered with rice husks and a mysterious beetle. Still, you did it. You moved your rice kids into their new apartment. Sure, it's damp, cold, and inhabited by frogs, but it's theirs now. And tomorrow, the real babysitting begins.
Your legs ache in places you didn't know had muscles. Your spine crackles like an old lacquer screen every time you bend. And yet, here you are again, back in the paddy, squatting politely like a soggy little question mark. Only now, things feel different. There's a distinct choreography unfolding around you. Who moves where, who calls the shots, who never touches mud if they can help it. Welcome to the social hierarchy of muck. It starts small. One man shows up wearing a cleaner robe than anyone else. He doesn't carry seedlings. He carries a fan. And he stands on a dry plank that's been delicately balanced on the edge of the paddy. He's not being lazy. He's being important. This is the nanushi, the village headman. He's responsible for organizing labor, smoothing disputes, and yes, making sure nobody sneaks a nap under the pretext of checking seedling density. He's joined by a couple of other dry-shoed souls, scribes, minor officials, the guy who owns more land than teeth. Meanwhile, you and your fellow mud-huggers are waist-deep, working in slow, synchronized lines, each movement watched and occasionally corrected with the kind of advice that somehow sounds both helpful and vaguely insulting. "Your row's drifting like a drunk carp," says a voice above. You squint through muddy bangs. The landowner smiles, sipping tea. Must be nice. This is where you begin to really feel the stratification. Everyone contributes, sure, but not equally. Higher-ranked villagers and those with more land get lighter work, or at least drier feet. Peasants with no land, full mud immersion. And don't even start on outsiders or widowed women, often consigned to the hardest tasks with the least credit. That said, there are exceptions. Some ba-chan, village grandmas, are revered not for their status, but for their skill.
You watch one today float across the field, correcting rows with 2 fingers and a death glare. She doesn't need a title. She has legacy. Oh, and speaking of hierarchy, remember those fancy hats some supervisors wear? In some areas, these weren't just for fashion, they were actual rank indicators. A particular woven bamboo style was reserved for those who'd passed certain bureaucratic tests or paid enough tax to qualify as honorary not peasants. Fancy headgear, muddy legacy. Historians still argue about how rigid these village hierarchies really were. Some claim they were fluid, based on contribution and merit. Others believe power was tightly held, passed down like heirloom hose and ceremonial teacups. The truth probably squishes somewhere in between. You, of course, don't get a hat. You get a reed tied around your wrist to identify which row you're working on, in case anyone needs to, say, offer feedback. Spoiler, they will. Still, there's a weird rhythm forming. The rows line up, the chatter hums along. Someone starts singing a paddy tune, something about frogs, rice, and an unfortunate dream involving a duck. It's catchy. You find yourself smiling, even as your knees send angry letters to your brain. By evening, the transplanting is nearly done. The higher-ups leave first, robes still suspiciously clean. You watch them go, then slosh out of the field, shoes in hand, mud in ears, heart oddly full. Hierarchy or not, you helped fill a field with life today. And even if no one gives you a fancy title, you've earned at least one thing: the deepest, dreamiest sleep known to mankind.
You're halfway through rinsing your arms in a trickling stream when you hear it. Soft giggles, a sudden splash, and then the unmistakable thwack of a wet clump of mud hitting someone's back with deeply satisfying precision. You glance up. It started. The transplanting crew is done for the day, but the mud is eternal. And once work ends, so does the fragile illusion of adult dignity. Welcome to one of medieval Japan's lesser documented traditions, the rice paddy social hour. It begins with subtle jabs, someone accidentally flinging mud while shaking off their sleeve, a foot nudging another foot under the water. Then comes the full-on mud wrestling. You watch 2 teenage boys go down in a splash, grinning like lunatics, rice seedlings still tangled in their hair. One girl launches a clod the size of a melon and nails her older brother square in the face. The village elder, normally grumpier than a bear in a thunderstorm, actually chuckles before returning to his pipe. Of course, this isn't just fun and games. It's a release. Transplanting is grueling, repetitive work, and the paddy is basically a pressure cooker of sweat, stress, and secondhand herbal poultice smells. These little bursts of laughter help bleed off the tension. Plus, it's a great excuse for gossip. You slosh over to where a few of the older women are washing their hands and definitely not talking about the local shrine maiden's recent, mysterious visits to the traveling blacksmith's tent. You try to act casual, but your ears practically lean into their conversation. Secrets, alliances, courtships, complaints, everything flows freely here, as naturally as water through the channels. Medieval Japanese villages were tight-knit, but not always peacefully so. Families had long memories, marriages were strategic, and every act of kindness or pettiness was noticed. The paddy is where reputations are reinforced or quietly undermined. One careless weed left unpulled? Someone will mention it at the bathhouse tonight. Borrowed a sickle and returned it with a crack? Expect side-eye for a week. One guy even tried to impress a girl by hand-carving a wooden seedling paddle for her. It broke in half on the first use. She now refers to him exclusively as Splinter Boy. And then there's the unspoken rule of paddy teamwork. If you mess up, cover it with humor. Drop a bundle of seedlings? Pretend they were rebelling. Trip in the mud? Go down dramatically and shout, "The gods demand a sacrifice." You'll get a laugh.
instead of a scolding. Usually. Oh, and here's a quirky bit. Some villages believe that if you laughed too loudly in the field, you'd scare off the rice spirits. So, naturally, people tried to stifle giggles, resulting in an entire genre of muffled snort laughter and silent shaking fits. You experience one today after someone slips and falls while dramatically monologuing about being reborn from the mud. You nearly pass out trying not to snort. Scholars still argue how much these communal work moments influenced village cohesion. Were they crucial to survival, or just a natural byproduct of shared suffering? Either way, there's no denying that rice paddies doubled as medieval Japan's gossip lounges, therapy circles, and occasionally dating apps. By sundown, you're filthy again, but it's the fun kind of filthy. The kind that comes with laughter, with camaraderie, with a secret or two stuffed in your pocket for later. You rinse your arms once more, and this time the water feels warmer. Or maybe it's just you sinking a little deeper into the rhythm of it all. You wake to the sound of rattling bamboo and crows screeching like they've just read your diary. Outside, the sun hasn't quite risen, but the villagers are already up, clustered around bundles of straw and bits of cloth. Today, it's not about mud or water. Today, it's about warfare against birds, with scarecrows and spirits as your only backup. You've probably seen scarecrows before, maybe in a kid's book, maybe guarding a sad little pumpkin patch. But in medieval Japan, scarecrows, or kakashi, weren't just stick figures with floppy hats. They were spiritual guardians, battle-hardened defenders of rice. And today, you get to make one. Yay! Your group gathers at the edge of the paddy, building these lopsided warriors from bundled straw, broken tools, discarded robes, and sometimes even old footwear. You're handed a shriveled turnip for a head and told to make it look terrifying. You try. It ends up looking vaguely apologetic. The old man next to you paints his scarecrow's face with ink, giving it enormous angry eyes and a snarling grin. Honestly, kind of impressive. You name yours Goro. He looks like he'd lose in a fistfight with a cabbage, but he's trying his best. There's a deeper layer to this than aesthetics, though. Some families dress their kakashi in specific colors to ward off certain birds. Blue for sparrows, red for crows. And in a twist you didn't expect, a few are not meant to scare away animals at all, but to attract the right kinds of spirits. Yeah, some scarecrows are offerings, not deterrents. You watch as one family gently hangs a paper talisman from theirs, muttering a prayer for good harvest and gentle winds. The placement is crucial. Too close, and they become soggy statues. Too far, and they're useless. There's even a local superstition that if a kakashi casts a crooked shadow at noon, you have to rebuild it or risk a crooked harvest. You squint at Goro as the sun rises. His shadow looks more confused mime than sinister guardian, but no one calls you out. Yet. This patch of folklore might seem quaint, but it had real weight. Villagers genuinely believed that spirits, kami of the fields, inhabited the paddies, and scarecrows were both defenders and diplomatic liaisons. Historians still debate whether the widespread use of kakashi was more about community ritual or actual pest control. But from what you see today, it's clearly both. There's a moment of silence as all the scarecrows are planted upright. The wind shifts. For a second, it almost feels like they breathe. Then, a crow lands right next to Goro and starts aggressively pecking at the mud. Right. You chase it off, flapping your arms like a lunatic. Someone laughs. Should have given him bigger eyebrows, they say. You consider adding some. Later in the day, Kids run along the dike paths, checking on each scarecrow like tiny soldiers on patrol. One of them ties a small bell to Goro's hand. "Extra warning," she says. Goro now jingles. You're weirdly proud. You head home that evening with dirt under your nails and straw in your hair, feeling like you've participated in something both silly and sacred. Your back aches, but your heart's light. And your scarecrow, he stands tall, or at least upright-ish, against the sunset, still losing that cabbage fight in your imagination, but standing.
The morning starts innocently enough. Mist curling above the paddy, birds chirping a little too cheerfully. You stretch your arms, feel the satisfying crackle of overused joints, and step outside with the naive optimism of someone who doesn't yet know they'll be knee-deep in weeds, superstitions, and snake sightings by lunch. Mid-season maintenance has arrived. It's been a few weeks since the rice was transplanted, and the fields have turned a vibrant, shimmering green. It's stunning, peaceful, deceptively serene. Because beneath that glossy surface, a battle is brewing. Weeds are sprouting, pests are multiplying, and the rice, bless its golden heart, is as needy as ever. You grab a sickle, a short, curved blade with a handle just long enough to be inconvenient, and march into the paddy like a soldier entering enemy territory. Your mission? Weed control. The rice roots are still delicate, so you have to slice around them carefully, removing intruding growths that compete for water, sun, and your sanity. It's like playing Operation, except in a swamp and with the constant threat of something slimy brushing your leg. Cue the snakes. Yes, snakes. You spot the first one around mid-morning, just a flicker of movement between two rice stalks. Probably a harmless rat snake, maybe even helpful in keeping down mice. Still, your heart does a polite little somersault into your throat. A villager nearby spots your face and casually says, "Don't worry, if it stares at you, just bow and leave." You're not sure if they're joking. You bow anyway. There's something deeply intimate about this kind of maintenance. You're working one-on-one with each stalk, checking leaves, feeling for softness that might mean rot. You even start giving them nicknames: Tall Guy, Extra Leafy, Suspiciously Leaning Greg. Yes, you're losing it, but that's part of the process. The village healer passes through, sprinkling a powdered concoction along the banks, crushed shells, ash, and a bit of dried mint. Supposedly, it repels insects and evil spirits. Some families go a step further and burn bundles of mugwort near the fields to keep both bugs and bad luck at bay. The smoke curls lazily into the air, making everything smell faintly herbal and ominous. You start coughing, and an elder hands you a cloth mask, saying, "Too much spirit stink is bad for the lungs." Scholars still debate whether such rituals had real pest control effects or were purely spiritual placebos. But either way, people believed in them. Because in a world where one bad week of weather could undo months of labor, you took any help you could get, even if it came from mugwort fumes and muttered blessings. The sun climbs higher, and the air turns thick and syrupy. You start hallucinating breeze. Your hand cramps. A frog hops up onto your foot and just stays there, like a tiny judgmental overseer. You name him Bossu and ask if you can take a break. He blinks. You interpret that as no. By the end of the day, you've cleared nearly a third of your assigned patch. You're sunburned, slightly paranoid, and convinced one of the rice stalks winked at you. But the field looks better, tidier, safer. You limp back home, carrying your sickle like a war trophy, still flinching at phantom snake movements. Rice is growing. Spirits are, for now, appeased. And your frog supervisor? Still sitting in the field watching. Bossu approves. Just when you think you've earned a breather, maybe a calm day of sun and light sweeping, Someone ties a ribbon around your wrist and hands you a ceremonial ladle. No explanation, just wear this, smile later. You know what that means. It's festival day. Now, before you get too excited, let's clarify. This isn't one of those streamers and snacks and fireworks kind of festivals. This is a midsummer observance, a tradition that straddles the razor-thin line between celebration and famine prep dress rehearsal. It's officially called Taue Matsuri in some regions, a time to give thanks to the spirits for the rice's growth and to remind everyone and the gods that we're all still working very hard, thank you. The entire village gathers near the shrine that oversees the paddies. Offerings are laid out, plum wine, mochi, dried fish, and a suspiciously twitching turnip that you decide not to ask questions about. A priest, robed in indigo and white, begins the ceremonial chant. It's rhythmic, rising and falling like breath. You don't understand all the words, but you feel them vibrating through the air, curling around your spine like incense smoke. Then comes the procession. You're part of the line that walks the field edges, clapping rhythmically and occasionally tossing flower petals into the water. It's beautiful, yes, but also practical. The movement's supposed to dissuade pests, real and spiritual, from lingering in the rice. A few villagers wear makeshift costumes, straw skirts, bird masks, one person in what might be an old futon pretending to be a rice god. You smile, until the futon slips and he face plants into a ditch. The gods apparently enjoy slapstick. Here's the kicker. This festival also doubles as a kind of status check. People bring out their best robes even if they're fraying. They joke, laugh, compare how green their fields look. You hear whispers about whose paddies are too thin, whose rows are off-center, and one poor soul whose scarecrow still hasn't scared a single bird. Godo, your own scarecrow, is mentioned. A little slouchy. Rude, but fair. Fun detail. Some villages performed a kind of ritual tug-of-war during this festival to predict the harvest. If the women's team won, the rice would be abundant. If the men's team won, the year would be tough. This year, the women win by a landslide. You exhale with cautious optimism. But even during all this festivity, there's tension. You see it in the way people glance at the sky, assessing the clouds. You feel it in the careful rationing of festival food, just enough to feel celebratory, not so much that you risk tomorrow's meals. Because everyone remembers last summer's bad rain. Everyone remembers the year the rice looked strong but fell to wind just before harvest. Historians still debate whether these mid-season festivals were genuine spiritual events or carefully timed psychological boosts to keep farmers from burning out. The answer you suspect is yes, all of the above. As the sun sinks, the village gathers for a slow, humming dance around the field. Lanterns float on bamboo rafts across irrigation channels, carrying prayers into the darkness. You light one, whisper something half silly, half sincere, and watch it drift. You're not just a worker anymore. You're part of a ritual that's older than any book you've read. And for a moment, the rice, the mud, the laughter, it all feels sacred. Also, someone just stole your sandal. You'll deal with that tomorrow.
It starts with a faint rumble, deep, low, the kind of sound that vibrates in your bones before your ears even register it. At first, you think it's a distant cartwheel on a rocky path. Then the sky flickers, the air thickens, and suddenly you're part of a medieval horror story called Leeches and Lightning. You knew summer would be brutal, but this is nature going full kabuki drama. The rain begins as a whisper, then a slap, then a full-on symphony of chaos. You're halfway to the field when it hits, the sky erupting in a waterfall of sideways droplets and the kind of thunder that feels personally directed. The paddies flood instantly, swallowing paths, borders, and any hope you had of a casual afternoon weeding session. The lightning is close. Too close. One bolt hits a tree near the irrigation channel, and you swear the rice spirits collectively gasped. You dive for cover under a low thatched roof with 3 other farmers and a soaking dog who looks more qualified to lead than any of you. "Just a summer storm," someone mutters, but the way his eyes twitch at every crackle says otherwise. When the rain finally eases, you return to the field to assess the damage. It's not catastrophic, yet, but the water level is too high, the banks are starting to erode, and worst of all, the leeches have arrived. Little black, wiggly freeloaders. They cling to your ankles like they've been waiting all season for this moment. You try to scrape one off and discover it's suctioned on with the determination of a bureaucrat chasing unpaid rice tax. "Salt," an old woman says, or fire, but fire's faster. You take her word for it. Interestingly, medieval farmers weren't strangers to this. Some even tied strips of horsehair around their calves as a primitive anti-leech barrier. Others swore by garlic paste rubbed directly onto the skin. Effective, but very unpopular at village dances. You go the garlic route. You will not be invited anywhere for the next 3 days. Amid the wriggling chaos, the village headman gathers everyone under the shrine roof. He announces that the tax collectors will arrive in less than 2 moons. The rice must be strong, the field borders clear, and the irrigation fixed. The rain might have set you back, but the tax won't wait. You hear a collective sigh, not of relief, but of resignation. It's a familiar tune. Historians still argue whether the government-imposed rice taxes in medieval Japan were fair assessments or deliberately punitive quotas meant to squeeze every grain from the countryside. Either way, you know what they mean. Panic. The next few days blur into emergency maintenance. You dig new drainage channels by hand, reinforce dikes with bundles of reeds, and try very hard not to think about how many leeches you haven't seen yet. You and your neighbors move like ants, panicked, efficient, endlessly grimy. You sleep less, you eat fast, you stop caring about mud. It's not clothing anymore, it's just part of you. But at night, when the wind cools and the frogs start their chorus again, there's still beauty. The rice still stands, shimmering green blades, swaying gently in the breeze, blissfully unaware of storms, taxes, and garlic socks. You smile, exhausted, itchy, but alive. And the leeches? They're probably still out there, planning.
You've reached that deliciously dangerous part of the season where the rice is mostly stable, the storms have passed, for now, and for about 10 whole minutes, you start to feel like you have your life together. That's the first sign of rice madness. The second, fantasizing about leaving the village entirely to open a tofu stand in Kyoto. You laugh to yourself as you wade through the paddies on another maintenance round. It's a beautiful morning, honestly. Mist drapes over the hills, the rice stalks are whispering their soft hush-hush in the breeze, and the frogs seem to be on break. No thunder, no leeches, and your garlic aura has faded just enough that people will speak to you again. And yet, as you bend to check a row, a treacherous little thought blooms in your brain like a weed. What if I just didn't do this anymore? You imagine a life in the city or in a temple or anywhere where the primary daily hazard isn't stepping on a hidden frog and screaming like a haunted bell. Some folks have left, you know. Not many, but enough to make the idea feel possible. A cousin who joined a merchant caravan, a friend who went to train as a monk, less rice, more chanting. Then there was that one guy who swore he was going to become a samurai, but he got winded walking uphill and now mostly sits under trees giving dramatic life advice. Still, you can't help but wonder, if you left,
Would the field miss you? Would your rice grow crooked from spite? There's a superstition about that, actually. In some regions, it was believed that the rice plants remembered who cared for them. If you abandoned a field mid-season, the next harvest would be bitter, literally, as if the rice carried heartbreak in its grain. You gently pat a stalk in front of you. Don't worry, I'm still here. It rustles suspiciously, as if judging you. Your internal tofu stand dream is interrupted by the sound of drumming. Not dwar drums, festival drums, which is slightly worse in this case, because the drum beats mean the village has decided to stage a morale-boosting ritual, a combination of singing, rhythmic planting demonstrations, and wildly performative gratitude for the rice gods. You're pulled into the event with zero warning. Someone ties a sash around your waist and shoves a ceremonial fan into your hand. The fan breaks. Symbolic. You spend the next hour pretending to know the words to a rice planting chant that everyone else was clearly taught in utero. Still, the rhythm is oddly soothing, and as you shuffle in a wide circle with the others, a strange calm falls over the group. It's like a trance. A shared, sweaty trance full of dust and drumming and too much sun. Historians still argue whether these rituals were meant to boost actual crop vitality or simply keep farmers from walking into the woods and never returning. Either way, they work. Kind of. For a while. As the ritual ends and the crowd disperses, you catch yourself smiling. The city might have bathhouses, but does it have frogs that nap in your sandals? A tofu stall might pay more, but will it ever whisper back when the wind moves through it? You sigh and sling your hoe over your shoulder, gaze drifting back across the field. For now, you stay. But you still hold on to that dream, just in case the rice ever breaks your heart first.
It's late afternoon, and the sun has gone full-on dramatic. Low in the sky, hot enough to make you hallucinate snacks, and casting long, golden rays across the rice paddies, like it's trying to win best cinematography. The field glows, the rice waves, and you are cleaning your fingernails with a splintered bamboo stick because the lords are coming. Yes, it's Paddy Inspection Day, or as you now think of it, Pretend Everything's Fine Day. You and the other farmers have spent the last 3 days furiously tidying up. Crooked rows straightened, excess weeds yanked, dike edges trimmed like they're attending a formal banquet. Even Goro, your scarecrow, has been patched up with a clean rag and now sports a piece of red cloth tied like a heroic cape. He still looks like a haunted turnip, but now he's a presentable haunted turnip. The village is on edge. The landowners, tax agents, and maybe even a regional official or two are coming to inspect the fields. They won't be doing any planting or weeding, heaven forbid their socks get damp, but they'll absolutely be judging. Their job is to assess productivity. How's the rice growing? Is the irrigation balanced? Are you trying hard enough? You line up alongside your fellow planters, covered in a tasteful mix of dried sweat and deliberate dirt. One elder mutters, "Stand straight, don't smile too much, and whatever you do, don't mention the toad infestation." Got it. The inspectors arrive with their entourage, robes fluttering, calligraphy scrolls ready for note-taking, and a collective energy that says, "We've never been this close to manual labor, and we'd like to keep it that way." They stroll the edges of the paddy, nodding thoughtfully, pointing with fans, occasionally raising an eyebrow. You swear one of them wrinkles their nose at Goro. Rude. At one point, they stop and question the spacing in your section of the field. You launch into a very confident explanation involving water flow, seedling strength, and possibly the moon cycle. They stare blankly. You throw in "the old ways teach us balance," and that seems to satisfy them. Score 1 for vague wisdom. Interestingly, the hierarchy doesn't end at the edge of the field. Even among the visitors, there's clearly a pecking order. The junior official scribbles, while the senior one just looks at things and nods like a fortune teller pretending they can read rice. This part of the season was critical in medieval Japan. Officials needed to predict the yield to estimate taxation. Some scholars argue that these inspections were wildly inaccurate, based more on appearance and assumptions than hard numbers. Others believe that seasoned inspectors could predict outcomes with surprising precision based on the plant color, stalk height, and water clarity. Either way, you know it's your job to look competent and hope the frogs don't riot mid-tour. Then there's the weird tradition some villages followed, planting a small cluster of sacrifice rice near the entrance of the field. Planted too shallow, grown too fast, meant to look good but not survive. It was a decoy, a performance. You watch a young boy nervously rearranging one of those clusters right now. Risky move, genius or doomed, depending on how observant the inspectors are. By sunset, the guests leave, leaving behind a trail of footprints, rumors, and one broken fan someone dropped in the mud. The villagers exhale in unison. You collapse near Goro, who now leans slightly left, but still stands proud. You did it. You looked competent. You might not get taxed into oblivion. That's worth a celebration, or at least a snack.
The air has stopped pretending. It's not humid, it's aggressive. The sun no longer shines, it looms, a giant, molten egg yolk overhead that scrambles your brain before breakfast. Cicadas scream like tiny demons in stereo, and every surface radiates a heat that makes you wonder if the gods forgot to turn the stove off. Welcome to peak summer in the rice fields, or as you now call it, the season of silent suffering. You rise with the dawn because it's the only time the earth hasn't turned into a boiling swamp. But even at sunrise, the heat is already percolating. You scarf down a cold rice ball, tie a damp towel around your neck, and trudge to the paddies. Your straw hat is more decorative than useful. It might as well be a halo made of suffering. Today is just routine maintenance. Pulling weeds, adjusting water levels, gently encouraging seedlings with passive-aggressive muttering. But everything feels harder. The mud clings tighter, the sun weighs more. Your thoughts melt somewhere between, I should check the southern trench, and what if I just laid down in this puddle and become a folklore ghost? You're not alone in your misery. The entire village has slowed to half speed. Conversations are minimal, replaced by nods, grunts, and the occasional, ugh. Even Bosu the frog is too hot to judge you. He's sunbathing on a rock, spread like he's doing frog yoga and spiritually transcending heat stroke. Some elders swear by tricks to endure this weather, placing lotus leaves in your hat, eating pickled plums to cool your blood, or whispering ice-related words like snow, mountain mist, or frigid disappointment. You try them all. Nothing helps. You briefly consider chewing on an actual lotus leaf. It's not tasty. Then there's the matter of clothing. You notice some villagers wearing white, believed to reflect heat and appease fire spirits. Others wear blue-dyed cotton soaked in river water. You? You're in whatever hasn't molded in your storage box. You smell like boiled straw and bad decisions. Interestingly, there's a bit of academic debate on just how medieval farmers managed work during this brutal part of the season. Some scholars suggest they rotated shifts to avoid full-day exposure. Others argue that endurance itself was considered a spiritual trial, part of the karmic cycle that connected toil to soul cleansing. You believe both. This must be soul cleansing because no other explanation justifies the mosquito bite on your eyelid. Speaking of which, the bugs.
The bugs are relentless. Mosquitoes, gnats, mystery insects that seem personally offended by your existence. One boy walks by fanning himself with a leafy branch and muttering, "If I get bitten one more time, I'm marrying a scarecrow and moving to the mountains." Honestly, not a terrible plan. Still, despite the heat, the rice continues to grow. Taller, stronger, greener. You notice tiny heads beginning to form on some stalks, delicate and promising. It's working. You're making food with your bare hands. Your sweat is literally soaking into your dinner. There's a strange peace in that realization. Amid the heat, the bugs, the silence, you feel a kind of quiet pride, like you're part of something slow and ancient and weirdly patient. No rush, just growth. You squint at the sky. Still hot, still merciless. But your rice is thriving. And maybe, just maybe, so are you. Slowly, silently, one sunburn at a time.
You know that uneasy feeling when everything's going too well? That ominous calm like the paddy is too green, the frogs too quiet, and the wind too cooperative? Yeah, you should have trusted that feeling. Because this morning, as you step into the field, the first thing you notice isn't the usual damp squish. It's the buzz. A low, unholy hum. And then you see them. Tiny black dots clustered on the underside of rice leaves. Clumps of wriggling, sap-sucking demons. Aphids. And not the chill kind either. These are rice plant hoppers, the villains of midsummer, the pests that turn your growing dreams into brittle stalks and moldy nightmares. You groan, long and low, already imagining the emergency village meeting that's about to hijack your afternoon. Turns out, you're not the only one dealing with an invasion. The entire west section of the paddies has been hit. Leaves curl, stalks droop, and everywhere you look, rice looks like it just got terrible news. By noon, the elders are gathered and the drum is beaten, the signal for a field crisis, because nothing says agricultural emergency like slamming percussion. This is when the real weirdness starts. Out come the emergency measures, some practical, others debatably sane. First, bundles of dried chili and mugwort are burned at the corners of each paddy. The smoke is meant to drive out pests and evil spirits, a double whammy of organic pesticide and purification. You inhale the spicy fog and immediately start crying. One elder cheerfully announces, "If your eyes don't sting, the spirits aren't listening." Cool. Then someone begins chanting. You watch as the village priest steps into the field with a ceremonial ladle and flicks sake into the air, asking the rice god to send the bugs elsewhere, preferably to that rival village down the mountain. A little petty, a lot relatable. But not all the responses are spiritual. Practical action is also taken. Sickly plants are removed and burned, dikes are reinforced to control water levels better since excess moisture attracts pests, and some folks even crush insects by hand with terrifying efficiency. A woman named Kiku moves through the paddy like a one-person bug apocalypse. You stay out of her way. Interestingly, some villages historically used ducks as biological pest control. Yes, ducks. They'd let them loose in the paddies where they'd gobble up bugs without disturbing the rice. You briefly consider suggesting this until you remember the last time someone brought in ducks and they trampled 3 rows before falling asleep in the irrigation trench. Never again. And, of course, there's scholarly debate here too. Historians can't agree on how widespread or effective these pest rituals were. Some say they were rooted in actual agricultural science, but others argue they were purely symbolic. But standing in a fog of burning herbs, slapping aphids off your ankles while someone hums to a sake gourd, you start to believe a little in everything. By evening, the emergency begins to stabilize. The pests are still there, but so are you, and so is your village.
And the drumming? It's shifted. Slower now. Calmer. A rhythm that says, we've done what we can.
It sneaks up on you, right between two handfuls of weed pulling and one very undignified moment where you fall face first into the mud trying to grab a runaway sickle. Love. Or, well, something that smells like it, but with more rice husks stuck in your hair. You've noticed them before. One of the weeding crew from the South Plot. They're always there early, always humming some tune that sticks in your head like glue, and somehow managing to look graceful while ankle-deep in sludge and surrounded by frogs, which is unfair. You currently resemble a half-submerged radish and haven't had a dry elbow since May. The moment happens during a brief water break. You're both crouched by the irrigation channel, sipping from the same bamboo ladle, when your hands brush. Just a little. You glance up. They smile. And just like that, you're having a paddy romance. But of course, nothing in this village happens without everyone else knowing about it approximately 5 seconds later. By sunset, 3 elders are casually asking how your seedling rows are doing and if you've considered joining the South Plot crew more permanently. A kid runs by giggling something about matchmaking frogs. The scarecrows are judging you. Even Goro looks slightly smug. Romantic relationships in medieval farming villages were rarely private affairs. With tight-knit communities, arranged marriages, and shared labor roles, everything was both public knowledge and very delicately managed. Some matches were strategic, tying families together to solidify land use or consolidate water rights. But that didn't mean affection didn't bloom, even in the muck. You and your maybe almost sort of special person start sharing tools, sitting closer at lunch breaks, trading extra plum slices like it's a coded language. Once they leave you a rice cake shaped like a frog. You pretend it's a joke. You also absolutely keep it. There's even a superstition about this. If you find a heart-shaped rice clump during transplanting, you'll marry someone from that field. It's clearly nonsense. Until one morning, you step into the paddy and spot a rice clump shaped suspiciously like a heart. You look up. They're watching. You both burst out laughing, muddy water splashing as you stomp around the joke like it's cursed. And of course, there's debate among historians about how much choice medieval peasants really had in romance. Some argue love was a luxury, overshadowed by economic and family duty. Others say that despite constraints, genuine affection flourished in unexpected corners, like the corner of a weedy paddy, where you're now blushing uncontrollably because someone just called you both harvest sweethearts. You get teased mercilessly. Someone leaves a miniature scarecrow couple next to Goro. It's hideous. It's adorable. You roll your eyes and secretly fix their straw hands so they're holding each other. By nightfall, you're lying on your mat, feet still tingling from the day's work, cheeks warm not just from the sun, but from the weird, fuzzy hope now growing right next to the rice. Because yes, the field is full of bugs, back pain, and bureaucratic dread, but it's also full of rhythm, of laughter, of glances across rows of seedlings, and maybe, just maybe, something that feels like love.
The morning starts with a dull thunk, followed by a curse, followed by the slow realization that your most dependable tool, a well-worn seedling trowel with a bent but loyal blade, has finally snapped in two like an overcooked rice cracker. You stare at the broken handle in your hand, then at the fresh patch of weeding you were about to start. Perfect. You try to mask your panic with a nonchalant shrug, but inside, a tiny part of your soul lets out a dramatic wail.
Tools in this village are sacred, not in the shiny museum display kind of way, but in the "this thing is older than my great-uncle and might secretly be possessed" kind of way. And you just broke one. With no other option, you begin the ancient and nerve-wracking ritual of borrowing. Tool borrowing in a medieval Japanese village is not simple. It's part negotiation, part performance, and part reputation roulette. Everyone remembers who returned a hoe with a cracked handle or who borrowed a rake and forgot to bring it back until it was mysteriously renamed and living under a new family roof. You approach your neighbor with deep humility, offering a very apologetic bow and a small bundle of pickled radish slices. He eyes them, then eyes you, then sighs like he's just remembered that time your grandfather trampled his bean patch in the year of the mudslide. But finally, he nods and hands over a weeding claw that looks like it was forged during the Bronze Age and cursed shortly afterward. Don't drop it in the water. It doesn't like that. You're about to ask if he's joking. Then you remember this is a place where people talk to scarecrows and plant rice by moon phase. The tool is probably haunted. You accept it with the solemnity of someone being handed a sacred sword or a volatile pet. The first thing you notice about the claw is that it works. In fact, it's way sharper and more efficient than your broken trowel. The second thing you notice is that it makes a weird humming sound when you hit a rock. You whisper, "Sorry," and pat it gently, just in case. Here's the quirky part. In some areas, tools were believed to carry karma. If your tool broke mid-season, it meant it had fulfilled its duty, and if you borrowed another without properly introducing yourself, your rice might grow sideways, whatever that means. So you introduce yourself to the weeding claw, aloud. Someone walking by hears you and nods approvingly. You feel weirdly validated. Historians still argue whether such beliefs were purely symbolic or if people genuinely treated their tools like sentient coworkers. Based on today's vibe, definitely the latter. The work goes well, better than it has in days. You clear a solid section of weeds, and the borrowed claw hums happily, or threateningly, with each pull. By late afternoon, you return it, cleaned, polished, and bundled in fresh cloth. The owner grunts his approval. "Did it sing for you?" he asks. You blink, then slowly nod. "Yes, mostly in E minor." He chuckles. "You're lucky. Last time it bit someone." You don't ask for clarification. Some things are better left as folklore. As the sun dips below the trees, you look at your old broken trowel, now resting quietly in your tool basket. You'll fix it tomorrow. Or maybe not. Maybe it's time to retire it. Give it a place of honor next to your seed sacks. Because tools may break, but they're ghosts. Oh, they stick around.
Evening rolls in like a sigh. After a day of sweat, bugs, and ghost-infested gardening implements, you shuffled toward the gathering hut, feet squishing slightly with each step. Tonight's not about rice or weeding, or even haunted weeding claws. Tonight is for listening, for sipping, for sitting shoulder to shoulder with the people who've been breaking their backs beside you all season. Tonight is Elder Night. The sun's dipped just below the ridgeline, painting the sky with smears of orange and indigo. Inside the low-ceilinged hut, lanterns flicker softly, casting everyone's faces in a warm, nostalgic glow. Elders sit cross-legged near the center, each one holding a small cup of something vaguely fermented and wildly questionable. You sit nearby, your knees already regretting it. Someone hands you a cup. It smells like pickles, plum wine, and old secrets. You sip. It burns, but in a gentle, almost forgiving way, like it knows your sins. "Ah," says the old man next to you, smacking his lips. "This year's batch is much less flammable." You don't ask what happened to last year's batch. Then the stories begin.
One woman, face lined like parchment, talks about the year the rice sprouted upside down. "True story," she says. "The spirits were testing our faith." A man with half an eyebrow tells of the time a thunderstorm fried their entire irrigation system and 3 scarecrows. Everyone nods solemnly. Poor Goro would never have survived. The stories aren't just for entertainment. They're lessons, warnings, blueprints wrapped in exaggeration. One tale might start with a lazy farmer and end with a mountain spirit flooding his field. But the message? Pay attention to your water gates. Another might describe a rice yield so abundant that the granary burst open and crushed the taxman's cart. That one earns cheers. Amid the laughter, someone passes around small bowls of roasted chestnuts. You eat slowly, savoring the rare treat. These moments are the village's medicine, not just for the body, but the psyche. The heat, the pests, the bureaucracy. It all melts a little under the weight of shared memory and slightly pickled wisdom. You hear about a tool that supposedly sharpened itself if you whispered poetry to it. A frog that led someone to an underground spring. A girl who planted rice blindfolded and still had the straightest rows in the village because she listened to the wind, they say. Are these true? Probably not. But truth's beside the point now. What matters is rhythm, repetition, the soft hum of generations layering over one another like rings in a tree stump. There's scholarly debate, of course. Some argue these oral histories were crucial for transmitting agricultural technique in the absence of widespread literacy. Others say they were pure entertainment, meant to distract tired minds. But listening to them now, warm and soothed, you realize they were both. Survival and sanity. Inseparable. As the night deepens, someone pulls out a bamboo flute and plays a slow tune that sounds like evening rain. Eyes begin to close. Conversations taper off. The fermented drink hits its final soft note in your bloodstream. You think of everything you've learned, by doing, by failing, and now just by listening. You leave the hut smiling, toes numb, heart full. The field sleeps, and so soon will you. You wake up to a sound you haven't heard in weeks. Drums, but not the frantic, "Please someone slap the insects out of the field" kind. No, these are slower, deeper, ceremonial. And when you peek out your doorway, the sight confirms it. Bundles of green-tipped rice are swaying, not just in the wind, but in rhythm. It's here, the harvest whisper. It starts subtly, a slight shift in the hue of the fields from piercing green to golden jade, a softness to the air, the way the rice bows just a little heavier. And today the entire village can feel it. Harvest is close. Not here, not yet, but close enough to stir the heartbeat of every farmer in earshot. So the drums call you to attention, not for work, but for preparation. Because harvesting rice in medieval Japan is not just a job, it's a performance, an obligation, a gamble with nature, and a cosmic favor you do not mess up. You join the others at the field's edge where elders and experienced harvesters begin walking the paddies with that specific kind of seriousness usually reserved for rituals and extremely intense pickling. They inspect grain heads, checking how low they bend, feeling the density between their fingers, even sniffing the stalks, which somehow does tell them something. You try it too. Smells like grass and sun and possibly frog. There's a rumor that if the first rice stalk you test folds over without snapping, the harvest will be smooth. If it cracks, brace yourself. Yours folds beautifully. Someone claps you on the back. You try not to cry with relief. Then comes the blessing. Near the center of the field, a small makeshift altar has been assembled. Bamboo mat, a bowl of salt, a sprig of rice from last year's final harvest,
and a half-drunk sake bottle you suspect was partially consumed during setup. The priest arrives, mutters a few words to the rice spirits, and sprinkles water along the field edge. Everyone bows. Fun fringe detail: in some regions, the first rice stalk to turn golden was believed to house a spirit called Ina no Kami, the harvest deity. If you angered her by harvesting too early, too fast, or too sloppily, you risked a ruined crop next year. As insurance, a symbolic first cut was made by the oldest villager using the dullest blade possible. The spirits apparently appreciated effort over efficiency. That happens today. Granny Hana steps up with a rusted sickle and trims one stalk while whispering an apology. The crowd cheers, the drums thud once, and the harvest countdown officially begins. Historians still debate how scientifically sound these rituals were. Were they simply traditions passed down without reasoning, or were they subtle, experience-based ways to measure crop readiness before writing or data charts existed? Probably both. Regardless, you're not questioning it, not after watching Granny Hana whisper to rice and make it blush. After the ceremony, the field buzzes with subtle urgency. You sharpen your sickle. You prepare the bundles of twine. The storage huts are swept. Even Goro gets a fresh bandana tied around his straw neck. He's ready too. As you walk home, rice stalks whisper behind you like a crowd of monks practicing humility. You feel it in your chest. This is the moment you've been crawling through: mud, storms, and mosquito warfare. The finish line isn't far, but neither is the hardest work of the year. Tomorrow, you begin the cut.
The sickle feels heavier than usual in your hand this morning, not because it's actually heavier, but because it means something now. It's not a weeding tool today. It's a scalpel for the land, a way to cut the year open and see if everything you've suffered through was worth it. The sun peeks out like it knows it's been invited to something important. The fields shimmer, no longer green, but golden and soft, as if the rice has dressed itself for its final act. You take your position in the row, sickle in hand, toes gripping the edge of the mud like you're preparing for a duel. You breathe, then slice. The first stalk falls. You're not alone. A dozen others move in concert beside you, bending, slicing, binding, bending again. The air fills with the crisp snip of blades on stalks and the gentle rustle of grains brushing against one another. There's no shouting, no idle talk, just the rhythm. It's almost sacred, like a prayer repeated with your whole body. There's a practice here, one you've come to admire. Every few bundles, someone stops, wipes their brow, and bows lightly to the field. Gratitude. The harvest isn't taken, it's received. That mindset seeps into you the longer you work. You catch yourself whispering thanks to the bundle you tie, as if the rice might be listening. You're not even sure you're joking anymore. Some families still use a traditional chant while they cut. Low, repetitive verses meant to honor the rice spirits and sync movement with breath. One of the older women hums one now, a tune that sounds like water lapping wood and wind passing through pine. It makes the whole field feel like it's swaying with you. Fun fact, in certain regions, sickles were sometimes passed down through generations, reforged, re-hilted, and kept sharp as family treasures. There's even one tale of a sickle that was said to bring a lucky harvest so long as it never drew blood. Today, you cut yourself. Twice. Very minor, but still. You gently apologize to the blade and keep moving. And it's not just physical work, it's logistical chaos too. You have to cut the stalks at just the right height, bundle them quickly, and carry them to the drying racks before the next person behind you steps on them. Some groups form chains. One person cuts, another bundles, another carries. Your group? A little more chaotic.
You trip over a bundle, fall sideways, and hear someone softly say, "The spirits are laughing." You respond by pelting them with a single grain of rice. Spiritually. There's still scholarly debate about whether rice harvesting in medieval Japan was truly communal labor or mandated service rotated among households. In truth, it feels like both, structured yet intimate, sacred yet exhausting. By mid-afternoon, the field looks like a battlefield where the rice has surrendered willingly. Neatly bundled stalks lie in rows, waiting to be tied and carried. Your arms shake. Your back is a whisper of pain. Your clothes are soaked with both sweat and a mysterious liquid you've decided not to identify. And yet, you feel amazing. You did it. You turned a swampy stretch of mud into something golden, something nourishing, something beautiful. You raise your sickle one last time, not to cut, but just to salute the sky. The rice has fallen, the spirits have watched, and you've earned your place among them.
Section 23. The sickles are back in their sheaths, some nicked, some bent, all thoroughly exhausted. But you? Oh, you're just getting started. Because if you thought harvesting rice was tough, allow us to introduce you to its cruel, uncaring sequel, threshing. Imagine this. You spend weeks coaxing fragile stalks from the mud, nurturing them with water, prayers, and the occasional blood sacrifice to mosquito horde. Then you finally get to harvest. Victory, right? Wrong. Because now you must beat, stomp, or twist the rice grains out of those stalks one by one like an overworked deity trying to shake blessings from stingy clouds. You're introduced to a device called the miba. It's basically a wooden plank with ridged slats, and your job is to slam rice bundles against it until the grains fly off like little golden fireworks. Sometimes you use a flail, a long wooden stick attached to another stick with a rope, essentially the rice version of a medieval nunchuck. Dangerous and deeply satisfying. Also deeply painful if you lose focus, which you do, twice. Your shins are now part of the learning process. The threshing ground is a cacophony of dull thuds, crackling husks, and intermittent yelps as someone inevitably flings a grain into their eye. It smells like dry grass, sweat, and glory, and failure, simultaneously. Some villagers swear by alternate techniques, twisting the bundles underfoot or stomping them with woven sandals. One grandma brings out an old foot-powered contraption that looks like it was designed by a rice-obsessed gremlin. It sort of works if you don't mind it squealing like a ghost every time it spins. Here's the thing, though. This step matters. If you're careless, you lose grain. If you're too slow, moisture ruins the lot. And every kernel lost is food, tax, or seed, or all three. You learn quickly to be both gentle and relentless. Every handful of grain that falls into your woven basket feels like a tiny golden paycheck. There's even a strange village superstition that says if you accidentally thrash the same bundle twice, it brings confusion to your household. You scoff. Then you do it. Twice. And forget where you put your lunch. Coincidence? Probably. Still, you label your bundles now, just in case. Some scholars debate how much of this process was done communally versus family by family. Was there a village-wide threshing event, or did people do it privately, clutching their harvest like dragons hoarding rice gold? From what you're experiencing, it's a mix. Everyone helps everyone, sort of, but there's definitely pride at stake. People sneak glances at each other's baskets. One guy loudly mentions how plump and obedient his grains are. You consider flinging a stalk at him. By evening, the field around the threshing area is littered with broken straw and scattered husks. You're covered in rice dust, and your arms feel like they're dangling from borrowed hinges. But in your lap, a small, proud heap of clean, separated rice. Actual food. Finally visible. Finally real. You cradle it like treasure, or a very awkward cat. The harvest isn't done, not by a long shot, but for the first time, You can run your fingers through what you've grown and whisper, "Worth it." Then you sneeze violently from the rice dust and decide that maybe next year you'll invent gloves. Word count 551. Awaiting. Continue.
You thought you were done once the grains were threshed, didn't you? Sweet, naive you. No, now you must face one of the most temperamental, nerve-fraying parts of the entire rice-growing saga, drying. Rice isn't ready to be stored or milled until it's properly dried. Too wet, and mold sets in. Too dry, and the grains crack and lose flavor. It's like trying to toast marshmallows over a fire that keeps changing direction, except the marshmallows are your entire food supply for the year, and the fire is the weather. You begin by helping set up the hazegake, a rustic yet genius-looking series of bamboo racks that stretch across the harvested field like wooden laundry lines from an agrarian dreamscape. Bundles of rice are tied tightly with twine, then hung upside down, golden heads dangling like sleepy bats. The drying racks look humble. They are in fact your last line of defense before disaster. The sun is out today, hot, unrelenting, generous, perfect drying weather. You hang your bundles carefully, spacing them so the air can pass through. You feel competent. Dare you say, optimistic? Big mistake. Because halfway through your third bundle, the wind shifts. A low groan rolls over the hilltops. You glance at the sky. Clouds. Fast-moving, suspiciously gray clouds. A frantic shout goes up, "Tarps!" And suddenly it's chaos. Villagers bolt from every direction, arms full of straw mats, canvas covers, and old fishing nets. The drying rice has to be protected now. A single unexpected downpour could undo days of labor. You throw yourself into the madness, anchoring a tarp corner with a rock, cursing the rice gods, and possibly the wind gods, for being such drama queens. Just as the first drop hits your nose, the last mat is in place. You stand in the drizzle, breathing hard, triumphant, and mildly terrified. The rain only lasts 10 minutes. Long enough to spike everyone's blood pressure, short enough to make you question your grip on reality. The sun returns like it forgot something. No apology. Welcome to the devil's wind season. Some villagers refer to this time as Narui Kaze, the tepid wind, a period when the temperature is warm enough to make you sweat, but the air holds just enough moisture to cause drying chaos. It's considered one of the most cursed periods in the entire agricultural calendar. Some even burn incense along the drying racks to fool the spirits into thinking the rice is already spoiled. You see this today. A woman lighting tiny cones of sweet-smelling smoke along the bamboo posts, muttering something about fox spirits and mold demons. You back away slowly and decide it's a good day to believe everything. There's ongoing debate among scholars over how effective these drying techniques were, especially with unpredictable weather patterns. Some argue that rural communities had mastered timing and wind monitoring to an impressive degree. Others claimed luck and quick tarp reflexes played a bigger role than anyone cared to admit. You can confirm it's absolutely the tarps. The evening sun glows orange on the drying racks, now swaying gently in the forgiving breeze. No more rain, for now. You peel off your damp shirt and hang it alongside the rice. It probably has a similar moisture content. As you sit down to rest, watching your bundles dry in the twilight, you feel something new. Ownership. You didn't just grow this rice, you're guarding it, nurturing it, defending it like it's your own mildly cursed child. And you will not let a petty cloud take it away.
You wake up to a sound that no one ever wants to hear after harvest. The clacking of wooden sandals, accompanied by the quiet but unmistakable chick-chick-chick of an abacus. The taxmen have arrived. There's something about their presence that makes everyone straighten their backs, tidy their drying racks, and suddenly pretend they've never once complained about how little rice they ended up with this year. Because the taxmen don't care about your heroic weeding, your leech battles, or the mysterious haunted claw tool you made peace with mid-season. They care about numbers and weight and, let's be honest, taking your best rice and smiling politely while doing it. They show up dressed far too clean for people allegedly walking through rural fields. Sandals lacquered, robes unwrinkled, their scrolls are pristine, their writing brushes sharp. You'd think they were here to paint a seasonal landscape instead of assess your life's work and claim a significant chunk of it. You line up with the others. Bow. Smile. Try to keep your eyes from twitching as they start evaluating the bundles. Rice taxes, called nengu, were the cornerstone of feudal governance. Each village owed a certain quota, and yes, it was measured in actual rice. No gold coins, no IOUs, just grain. Because in medieval Japan, rice wasn't just food, it was currency, it was power. It was essentially your rent, your insurance, your social status, and your bargaining chip if things went sideways. Today, the inspectors go through each drying rack with eerie precision. They examine grain color, weight, even the tightness of your bundles. You swear one guy sniffed a sheaf. They jot things down on scrolls, speak in whispers, and once, very dramatically, one of them frowns at a perfectly normal rice head. The whole village collectively holds its breath. There's a superstitious practice you witness, one you didn't know existed until now. A tiny string of red paper has been tied near one drying rack. It's a charm meant to confuse greedy spirits, often placed subtly near your best rice so that inspectors might overlook it. Whether the taxmen are those greedy spirits is not a conversation anyone says out loud. The owner of that charm-laced rack? They get away with a smaller take than expected. Everyone notices, no one says a word. The charm quietly disappears by sunset. Historians debate just how consistent or fair these tax assessments were. Some evidence suggests that villages negotiated their quotas based on prior years and hardship claims. Others point to widespread underreporting, smuggling, and more than a few bribes hidden in grain sacks. You believe it. Today's fairness feels suspiciously based on which inspector you get and how generous their mood is post-lunch. When they finally reach your rack, you stand with your hands behind your back like a school child during Judgment Day. They poke, measure, click their abacus beads with vaguely threatening efficiency. You offer no commentary, just a hopeful nod and a subtle lean toward your less impressive bundles, hoping to draw attention away from the good stuff. They leave you with a receipt carved on a thin slat of wood and a polite, "We'll be back next season." You nod, grinning through your molars. They walk off with 2 full sacks. And just like that, a third of your rice has vanished. Poof, gone. Your back still hurts from threshing it, but hey, it now belongs to the regional lord. Probably to be eaten in a castle while you chew on radish tops. You return home and stare at what's left. Still plenty, but somehow less than you expected. Still, you tell yourself, it's enough. It has to be. You take the abacus clicking out of your ears and start planning dinner.
The taxmen are gone. The rice racks are lighter. And for the first time in what feels like years, even though it's only been a season, you're holding a woven basket of rice that's yours. Not the Lord's, not the shrine's, not your neighbor's. Yours. So what do? You throw a party. Kind of. It's not quite a bacchanalia. No one's diving into barrels of sake or juggling grilled eels, though if they did, you wouldn't blame them. But tonight is the harvest feast,
A meal to celebrate, to honor the spirits, and to finally, gloriously, eat like you didn't just spend 8 months watching your food grow inch by inch like an anxious helicopter parent. The village square has been swept, lanterns are strung up in crisscrossing loops that sway in the cool air like sleepy fireflies. The children are dressed in their least muddy outfits. Someone even tuned the shamisen. You don't know who did it, but they deserve a statue. And the food. Oh, the food. First, there's onigiri, rice balls wrapped in shiso leaves and sprinkled with roasted sesame. Then a hearty miso soup bubbling with root vegetables, pickled cucumbers, grilled river fish, roasted chestnuts. You can smell the steam rising from bamboo baskets as women carry them in slow processions like they're delivering edible treasure. There's even dessert. Sweet rice dumplings with a hint of plum. You eat 3 before anyone can stop you. Someone slaps your wrist and hands you a 4th. This is love. But it's not all indulgence. As the night wears on, the elders begin to quietly, casually, very politely remind everyone that this feast is also your ration calculation for the year. Yep, that little mound of rice in your storehouse, you're expected to make that stretch until the next harvest. Which means this feast is both celebration and budgeting exercise. It's why each family is careful. Half their rice is steamed, the rest is stored in clay jars and straw sacks, hidden under floors or in attic lofts, labeled with little talismans to keep out bugs, thieves, and spirits with snack addictions. You overhear someone whispering that if you dream of someone stealing your rice, it means you've stored it incorrectly. You consider sleeping with a basket under your futon, just in case. Some regions practiced a curious tradition, burying a small pouch of freshly harvested rice in the corner of the paddy as an offering to the Tanokami, the local rice deity. So they don't get lonely in winter, one child tells you earnestly, mouthful of dumpling. You promise to bury a snack tomorrow. Spirits like leftovers too. Historians still argue about whether post-harvest feasts were communal obligations or optional indulgences. In your experience, they're both. Everyone needs this, even if it's just one night. A reminder that the pain, the grime, the cursed mud tools and scarecrow drama, it all led to something real, something warm. As the evening winds down, someone starts playing the bamboo flute again. The melody's slow, sleepy, laced with that feeling you only get when your stomach is full and the sky is finally cool enough to feel like silk. You lie back, head on your hands, rice still clinging to the edge of your mouth, and watch the stars emerge. You survived the season. The rice is home. And for once, you're not thinking about leeches. You're just thinking about maybe having seconds.
The next morning arrives slower than usual, sliding over the hills with a reluctant yawn. Your body aches in familiar, slightly smug ways. You survived the harvest, fed yourself silly, and now you do what every good rice farmer must, immediately pivot into spiritual bookkeeping. Because before rice is eaten, before it's sold, stored, or hidden from particularly nosy tax collectors, a portion of it must be offered. The temple bell chimes softly as you carry a small bundle, clean, plump, and carefully tied in woven straw, to the village shrine. It's not just tradition, it's obligation. Rice isn't yours until you've thanked everything that might have helped grow it. The sun, the wind, the mud spirits, your ancestors, and probably the frog that sat in your trench and judged you for 3 months straight. The altar is already full of offerings, bowls of rice, miniature dolls made of straw, small dishes of salted fish. Someone's left a bright red ribbon tied around a bamboo stalk. A baby toddles by with a half-eaten rice ball and deposits it proudly at the steps. The gods now have a snack. You kneel, bow,
offer your rice with quiet breath, and as your forehead touches the tatami mat, something inside you softens. It's not religion so much as rhythm, a seasonal punctuation, the sentence that ends the farming cycle with a whisper instead of a bang. There's a local superstition that if your offering is too stingy, the spirits will cause your storehouse to leak, or worse, invite mice. Some go overboard, leaving elaborate altars with incense and rice flour sweets. You keep it simple, honest, a handful of your best, shaped into a tight little ball, like you're handing the gods your heart on a plate. After the shrine visit, you join your family in lighting small candles around the house. These aren't for ambiance, they're for the ancestors. This is the season when spirits are believed to walk among you, checking in, peeking into your bowls, and, if they're feeling particularly ghostly, sneaking a few grains for themselves. You leave a dish out for them, just in case great-great-grandpa is still opinionated about your seasoning ratios. Fun little quirk. In some regions, farmers carved tiny rice guardians out of soft wood, smaller than your thumb, and tucked them into their storehouses to keep watch. They're hideous. One has 3 noses. Another looks like a turnip with eyes. You make one yourself. It immediately falls over. Still counts. Scholars still discuss how deeply integrated these practices were into everyday agricultural life. Were they mandatory rituals or simply ways to cope with the immense uncertainty of food production in a world with zero safety nets? Either way, they gave structure, meaning, and occasionally some really creepy carved wooden dolls. Later that night, the entire village joins in the final ritual of the season, the lighting of floating lanterns. Hollowed gourds or paper boats with small flames are set adrift in the stream, each one carrying prayers, thanks, or softly whispered hopes. You kneel beside the water, light your lantern, and whisper something personal. It floats gently downstream, bobbing between reeds, light flickering like a heartbeat. You sit for a while, knees tucked to your chest, watching the lanterns disappear into the darkness, like fireflies returning to whatever rice spirit dimension they came from. You've honored your grain, your ghosts, your gods. And tomorrow? Tomorrow begins the long, quiet wait.
The mornings are colder now. The steam from your tea curls upward like a ghost stretching its arms, and the first frost has whispered its way onto the outer fields. Your breath fogs in the air, and for once, the mud is firm beneath your feet. The paddies, once buzzing with life and stress and frogs, are quiet now, resting. You walk the field edges, not because you have to, but because it's habit, the kind that doesn't wash off just because the harvest is done. The water channels are mostly drained. The stalks are gone. What's left is a patchwork of brown earth and stubble, stretching into the hills like the scars of a healed wound. Winter is here, or at least its vanguard, and that means one thing. It's time for everything else. The rice might be in the storehouse, but your work isn't over. The thatch roofs on several homes need repairing. Snow will be here before you can say, please, not another shoulder injury. Your tools, all dull, all tired, much like you. So you set to work slowly, methodically, like someone peeling bark off a long year. First comes sharpening. You sit with a small whetstone and your beloved sickle, the one you almost bled to death with, and give it a new edge. It's meditative, a quiet ritual. You even mutter a thank you to the blade. Somewhere, your scarecrow nods in approval. Then come repairs. The hoe with the split handle, the water bucket with a slow leak, the drying rack poles that splintered under the weight of wet grain. You fix what can be fixed. What can't be fixed gets transformed. You're not wasteful.
No one in the village is. A cracked pot becomes a seedling basin. A broken rake becomes a clothesline. One villager even turns a snapped threshing paddle into a very sturdy back scratcher. Innovation through desperation. You help reinforce the storehouse, too, stuffing straw between slats, hanging charms near the grain jars. There's a fear, not loud but real, that a bad winter could invite rats or mold or worse. You hang garlic, you offer rice at the door, you whisper to the corners. You're not taking any chances. And this season, the elders begin their storytelling again. Every evening, as the sky darkens early, families gather around indoor fires, sipping hot barley tea and listening to tales of winters past. Some inspiring, some terrifying, all delivered with dramatic pauses and way too much emphasis on, "and then we almost starved." These stories are more than entertainment. They're instruction manuals, warnings, blueprints for resilience. You lean in, absorbing every exaggerated detail about the year of 3 blizzards and the winter the sake froze. There's a peculiar superstition in the village this time of year. You're supposed to leave a single grain of rice in every dish you eat during winter, not for waste, but as a sign of respect, a way to say, "We remember how this got here." You start doing it without thinking. Historians often gloss over the winter cycle in medieval farming life. It's quieter, sure, less dramatic, but it's where endurance lives. It's the season where preparation becomes protection and stillness becomes its own kind of prayer. You finish your rounds and look out across the dormant field. Frost sparkles on the surface, delicate and dangerous. The paddy sleeps. And soon, so will you.
It begins with the clack of bamboo and the creak of a gate. Winter hasn't fully left, but the air feels looser, softer. Somewhere in the distance, a stream gurgles with a little more arrogance, and the sun has started showing up to work on time again. You take one cautious step outside and realize that, yes, the thaw has begun. And so it begins again. The paddies, once locked under layers of frost and silence, are now melting into their old selves, muddy, stubborn, and utterly unapologetic. The snowmelt flows in slow rivulets, carving gentle paths down the slopes. You can already see where last year's repairs didn't quite hold. The water's seeping under one of the dikes like a bored thief. Time to fix that. Again. You roll up your sleeves again. The winter break was real, sure, but not long enough to forget how hard this next part will be. Everything is stiff. Your hands, your back, the handles of your tools. Even Goro, who somehow survived the snow with one arm still upright, leans at a new existential angle. You nod to him respectfully. We go again, old friend. Today is about rebuilding. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but in the, yep, the sluice gate is jammed with sticks again kind of way. You scrape mud, clear channels, and test the water flow with a hollowed-out gourd and an impatient glare. Every household sends someone to walk their field borders, checking for frost heave, erosion, or, surprise, last year's forgotten tools buried just beneath the surface. You find your lost planting paddle. It's waterlogged and split. You still clutch it like treasure. There's a custom in the village. Before the year's first work begins, the youngest member of each household must toss a grain of uncooked rice into the center of their paddy. It's symbolic, a first meal for the field. You watch a toddler waddle out with a serious expression, drop the grain, and waddle back like she just closed a sacred transaction. You applaud, quietly, reverently. Tool maintenance continues in the background. The blacksmith's forge hisses back to life, and the air smells like smoke,
iron and ambition. You hand over your sickle, your old, slightly bent but beloved blade, and he promises to whisper it back into shape. You don't question what that means. You just nod like you understand. Scholars often wonder how medieval farming communities maintained morale year after year. Was it hope? Ritual? Communal pressure? Probably a mix of all three. But out here, in the cold mud, with a leaky water channel and the same three songs echoing across the valley, it's not morale, it's rhythm. Life doesn't restart. It continues. Crooked and creaky, maybe, but forward. You spend the afternoon patching dikes with reed mats, hammering bamboo stakes, and muttering at a squirrel who keeps stealing from your compost pile. The work is hard, the rewards are weeks away, and your lower back has filed a formal complaint. But still, you press on. Because the field isn't ready, but it will be. And so will you.
The sky is the color of cooled ash, and the air carries that subtle, metallic scent that only comes right before rain, or maybe renewal. You stand at the edge of the field, straw sandals half submerged in the first true puddle of the season. It's quiet, save for the creaking of old bamboo gates and the low hum of frogs slowly returning to their squelchy dominion. You lift your foot and squish into the mud. The cycle begins again. It doesn't feel triumphant. It doesn't feel cinematic. It just is. There's no grand drumbeat, no shout from the hilltops. Just a quiet, squelching rhythm beneath your soles and the steady beat of your own breath. You bend, test the texture of the muck between your fingers. Yes, it's ready. Almost. Nearly. You look over your shoulder. Other villagers have begun trickling into the fields too. Shoulders hunched, hats low, tools strapped to backs like swords carried by sleep-deprived samurai. There are nods exchanged, no words necessary. You all know. You've done this before. Goro is there, of course. A bit more crooked this year. His straw body weathered from the snow, his head slightly lopsided, but still standing, still with you. You take a deep breath and begin trenching. It's slower this time. Your arms remember the weight, your feet the balance. Your mind drifts as you work, through memories of last season's harvest feast, the wild rush of the tax day, that haunted weeding claw, and even that shy glance across the paddy that bloomed into something like affection. You smile to yourself, gently. You stop and press your palm into the mud just for a second. Feel the earth pressing back. Not aggressively, just firmly. Like it remembers you. And you remember it. The villagers fall into rhythm, each trench a soft incision into the land. Someone begins to hum a planting song, not the loud kind, but the sleepy, dragging tune, sung mostly to keep the muscles moving and the mind from floating away. You hum too? Off-key. No one minds. Historians often write about the rice cycle in clean arcs: sow, grow, reap, rest. But they forget the quiet between those chapters, the little sighs of resistance, the ache of muscle memory, the ghosts of last season whispering in the reeds. You don't forget them. You live them. The trenching finishes just before sunset. You wipe your hands on your robes, stretch your back, and gaze across the paddies. They look like mirrors now, flat, waterlogged, expectant. The wind stirs the surface. The frogs begin again. And you, muddy, sore, maybe a little wiser, stand at the edge of it all with something resembling pride. You made it back.
Not just to the field, but through it. Through the long year of sunburn and floods, laughter and loss, taxes and toads. And tomorrow? Tomorrow you'll do it all again. Because the rice needs you. And maybe you need it too.
So now the lanterns are out. The fields have dimmed into silver pools. You're walking slowly now, not because you're tired, though you are, but because there's no need to rush. Not anymore. The village is quiet. The stories have been told. The rice has been sung to sleep. You settle onto your futon, limbs humming from memory more than pain, your breath slowing with the wind outside. You can almost hear the drip-drip of last light falling from the eaves. The frogs still murmur, not urgently, just enough to remind you that life goes on out there, even in the dark. Your hands remember the curve of the sickle. Your feet recall the warm suck of summer mud. And somewhere in the quiet corners of your mind, a scarecrow leans gently in the breeze, watching over it all. You did it. You lived the full year in the fields, through frost and flood, superstition and song. You planted, you worried, you hoped, you harvested. And whether the yield was abundant or just enough, you were there for every heartbeat of it. So let that memory settle. Let the weight of the season fall away like old straw slipping off your shoulders. Let the wind hum through the trees. Let the rice spirit sleep. And let your dreams wander where the moonlight touches the paddies in silence. There is nothing more to do tonight. Just rest. Just breathe. Just float.